Service expenses are third-party landing costs which are allocated to purchase orders and distributed across the items within those purchase orders. These costs are added to the item's unit cost. Under the Inventory tab, there are 3 new sections. Service expenses is where you set up new types of service expenses to select from later. New service order is where you add a service expense that has been invoiced to you and needs to be allocated to purchase orders. Service orders is where you actually allocate the expenses to the purchase orders and the items within them. Let's begin by going to Service Expenses. In here, click on the Service Groups tab to set up groups of service expenses. Select New Service Group. Name your service group and give it a code. Now go to the Service Expenses tab to create a service expense. Click on New Service Expenses. Name your service expense and select which service group it falls under. Let's create the expense storage under the group Freight. Then enter the currency and cost. This might be a fixed cost or a daily or hourly rate. Before we move on to creating service orders, make sure that you have set up the service provider as a supplier in your account. E.g., for freight-related expenses, set up your freight company as a supplier. When a service provider, e.g. the freight company, invoices you, go to New Service Order to add the service expense. Select the service supplier from the drop-down list. Let's choose our freight company. Under Item, add the service expense that this supplier has invoiced to you. Under Quantity, type in 1 if it is a fixed expense. For a variable expense, type the number of days or hours the expense has been charged for. When you're done, hit Save as Receipted and the transaction will be sent through to your Xero Freight expense account. Now go to Service Orders to view your service order and allocate service expenses to purchase orders. They are grouped by service supplier. When you click on a supplier, all service orders for them appear on the right. Click on the blue icon at the end of the row to allocate expenses for that service order. Each service expense in the service order appears as an item in here. First, choose whether to expense this item. Expensing is often used for purchase orders of items that are consumed internally rather than those sold as stock. This expense will not be allocated to individual items below. Next, add the purchase orders that these service expenses need to be allocated to. Click New Purchase Order, then search for the order you want to add. A full list of purchase orders will pop up for you to choose from. As you add purchase orders, the service expenses will be allocated to them based on their total value. To manually allocate service expenses with custom amounts, deselect the checkbox next to the Proportionate by Value. Once saved, you'll see that the list icons have turned green. This means that you can now allocate service expenses to specific items within each purchase order. Click on one of these green icons. Here you can see each line item in the purchase order. By default, the service expenses have been allocated in proportion to each item's total value. To manually allocate service expenses to each item with custom amounts, click Manual. Once you save, the status of this purchase order will turn green, meaning that it is complete. After you've finished allocating expenses for all purchase orders, the Save and Complete button will appear. Click this to finish this service expense allocation process. In your service orders list, this order's status is now allocated, meaning that all items within all purchase orders in this service order have been allocated. This updates each item's unit cost, which can be seen in their material item history. This is also reflected in their stock on hand value in Xero.